Obviously, we don't know who that woman would be. I frankly was not surprised. I mean, I've written this in the past that they almost had to, because of the nature of the Democratic Party these days. This identity politics reigns supreme, and here you have really a couple of old white men, running for president out of a party that fielded this great big diverse list of candidates, and it came down to these two guys, and 177, 178. So they have to do something, I think, to try to create this sense that they are representing the whole party. And, it's interesting. Biden has done very well among black voters, largely because of his service as vice president to Barack Obama. Sanders has done very poorly among black voters in both times that he ran. So that is a major issue, and which is why Biden has also said that my first Supreme Court pick would be a black woman. These are very unusual statements to be making at this stage, and I think it does show a desperation, a desire to appeal to narrow interest groups. I mean, he didn't even say it would be the best black woman. I mean, he made race and gender the only litmus test. Pretty shocking, but unfortunately par for the course in the Democratic Party these days. Well, I think the more obvious ones would be Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar, and Kamala Harris. The three women who were in the race, of course. And Klobuchar, I think, is an interesting one. Harris, she famously attacked Biden in the first debate. She didn't really have a very good campaign at all. She never over-delivered. She could have had what a lot of people thought could be an interesting approach, background, etc. But she never got out of her own way, never caught fire anywhere. Amy Klobuchar, senator from Minnesota, really did help deliver her state for Biden after she dropped out. And as you know, much of this, the Electoral College will be about the upper Midwest, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, etc. And if you could have a woman from that region who is popular in that region and who is proven to be a good vote getter, and that she could transfer her popularity, be on the ticket, that could be a reason to pick her. I mean, she's certainly experienced in the Senate, and so I think that she would be, if I were gaming out, if those were the three choices, I would think she would be ranked number one. The latest polls have Biden in front in all four, and I believe that he will win all four. There's no reason to think that Bernie Sanders has done anything to change the dynamic. And so at that point, the delegate math becomes almost insurmountable. Biden would still be, a fair way off getting majority. There are more states to come, of course, but Sanders is running too far behind. But I think even more than just that, he's clearly losing steam. His turnout is in many states already less than it was 4 years ago. That's not a good sign. The so-called Bernie bros, the young people who are the mainstay of his campaign, have been turning out in very lackluster numbers. So the fire, I think, is going out, and there's very little chance, I think, for Bernie Sanders to become the nominee at this, absent some great event that would turn this around, just on the basis of if this campaign proceeds as it has been, there's no reason to think that Biden will not be the nominee at this point. Well, President Trump was asked about that today at a press conference, and did he favor postponing any of these primaries? And he said he did not. He said that he would leave it to the states, of course, who administer these. He said, but I think when you start to postpone an election, that's a really heavy thing to do. And he said he would go forward, and he thought that it could be done safely. And the states have taken lots of measures. Most of them, too, have had early voting. So a number of people have already voted, some by mail. so they don't have to actually go to a polling place. But there are concerns about the poll workers, the people who sit there all day. Here, as in everywhere else, we're trying to distance ourselves from other people, so you sit 4, 5, 6 feet apart. But at this point, it looks as though only Ohio, but if that were to change, you could then see a snowball effect in the upcoming primaries. And then, of course, you get into the conventions, and then finally the fall elections. So there's a lot of things up in the air right now. Each day, it seems, the president and his medical and public health officials sort of tighten the circle a little more about, crowd size, all of those things, self-quarantining. And so at this rate, it feels as though that we're getting to a point where nothing is going to be held, that there will be no events, no public events anywhere. I mean, in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut now, for example, starting at 8 p.m. tonight, restaurants are closed. They will still deliver food, but they will not be open to the public to come in and sit down. Bars, the same thing. So this is getting quite extreme. The president has asked people more and more to quarantine themselves and to take the next 15 days and really try to ramp up all of these restrictions so that, as he said and his team said today, if we can do this, if we can stop the person-to-person spread for a period, then we will have saved ourselves an enormous amount of trouble down the road. And someone pointed out to me today, I saw a story, the United States Surgeon General reported that the United States today has something just like the situation Italy had 2 weeks ago, the number of cases, the number of deaths. And now you see what has happened in Italy. It's just exploded in the last 2 weeks to where it is clearly the epicenter within Europe. So there is this concern that once it, kind of like a jet going through warp speed, the closer it gets, the faster it goes. And I think that the number of people being infected is jumping radically. And so I think that's why this additional restrictions are being taken today. I think that starting with his speech last Wednesday, his Oval Office address, I think that marked a turning point. Now, I thought that speech was pretty good. I was in the distinct minority on that. But what I thought was good about it was, frankly, the fact that he gave it and the fact that he said the right things. I had written a column earlier saying that when you look back at Winston Churchill rallying the Brits against the Nazis, FDR and his fireside chats during both the Depression and World War II, and even Rudy Giuliani in the aftermath of 9/11. The leader needs to be there. The leader needs to communicate caring and strength, but also, I think, this sense of an indomitable will, that we will prevail. We shall prevail. We will not stop short of victory. And I think the president that night, that Wednesday night speech, began that process of communicating that message. And I think his Friday press conference in the Rose Garden was better yet. He had a lot of CEOs from people who are trying to help with the testing, speed it up, make it more available, talking about supplies of food supplies and toiletries and hand wash and sanitizers, all of these things. So I think the president is into this now. He's not holding back. He totally owns this. And he had another press conference today where I thought he was quite effective. He doesn't come alone. He brings his team of medical and healthcare and sometimes some CEOs to show that we're all in this together. We're doing what we can, and we ask for your cooperation. He's working very closely with the governors. That has been a good relationship. There was criticism there in the beginning, and that has largely died down. And a lot of these are Democratic governors, of course, especially the big states, California, New York, Illinois. He's working well with them, it seems. So I think that the country as a whole, like a big battleship, is turning. And I think we're now very close to being straight in the water and all headed in the same direction.